Dan Pinchbeck is one of the founders of Open City, an art and literary journal. He was a 1999 to 2000 fellow of the National Arts Journalism Program at Columbia University and has written for many leading magazines. He's the author of 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl from Torture Penguin in 2006, and Breaking Open the Head from Broadway Books in 2002. He's editorial director of Reality Sandwich. I give you over to Dan to open us up. Thank you.
Thanks. Great to see you all out here, and I'm really honored to have been invited to speak and to open the event. I think last year, remember I was friends with Kevin, and he put on the First Horizons, and I was like, well, Kevin, why didn't you invite me to speak? And he was like, oh, your ideas are much too dangerous for what we're trying to do. So either my ideas have become less dangerous, or everything else has become more dangerous to match my ideas. I don't know. So I've written 2 books, Breaking Open the Head and 2012, which is this book. My own personal story is sort of laid out in the books. Is this mic good in terms of sound and everything? What's that? Move back a little bit? Or turn it down or something? Okay, it sounds a little bit off. Anyway, the first book, I started out, I was a New Yorker, I was a journalist, I was working in magazines, I went through a kind of spiritual existential crisis. At that point, I went back through my life and remembered the psychedelic experiences I'd had in college, which had been, for me, the only profound opening to a sense that there were other forms of consciousness, other dimensions of reality beyond the kind of secular materialist worldview and paradigm that I'd been brought up in. So at that point I decided, since I had these journalistic tools, to really explore this whole area, as seriously and deeply as I could, and it just kept, opening up for me at that point. So I went and re-explored mushrooms and LSD, and then I began to get magazine assignments for the Village Voice. I took an ayahuasca session downtown. Then I got an assignment to go to West Africa and take Iboga, which is a West African psychedelic, sometimes known in the West as ibogaine, in an initiation ceremony with the Bwiti tribe. And Iboga is now being used as a treatment tool for addiction, for heroin and cocaine addiction, which I think people are going to talk about later this weekend. I also went down to the Amazon to visit a tribe in Ecuador called the Sequoia, who had preserved this really extraordinary ayahuasca tradition, and did all-night ceremonies with them, and lying in there in these hammocks in their temples and stuff like that. And visited the Mazatec Indians in Mexico, where the mushrooms were rediscovered by Gordon Wasson in the 1950s. Really it was a very transformative process for me. And in Breaking Open the Head, I really described kind of step by step the shift in my kind of underlying paradigm and belief system for understanding the world, understanding reality. And part of that had to do with opening or accepting that there were these kind of psychic dimensions to existence that our modern culture had suppressed and negated. And it was really a question of kind of reality testing, like step by step. I would have these shamans would channel information that they couldn't have known from ordinary means about my family and my background. I would get insight into my future. I would collect anecdotes from people where they had gotten profound insights into their lives and their future that then came true. I began to have kind of synchronistic experiences, almost like a sort of new field of synchronicities kind of appeared in my life. And I had even occult episodes where it seemed like spirits would visit me and cause trouble, and I had no belief in the occult. I had to then kind of backtrack and try to understand, what did it mean that these experiences happened to me. So sort of step by step through Breaking Open the Head, I shifted from a materialist and secular understanding of the world to sort of accepting that there were these shamanic and mystical and occult dimensions of reality that our mainstream culture had suppressed and negated. And then when I really went and started thinking about that, I realized that that had been like a long historical process. Like if you look at the Middle Ages with the Inquisition, in Europe, they really went after everybody, or I guess we went after everybody who possessed a second sight, who possessed knowledge of working with plant teachers, kind of seer capabilities, and burn them at the stake. They tried to stamp out that kind of knowledge. when we became imperialists and colonialists, we went all over the world, and everywhere we went, where we found remnants of this archaic knowledge system, shamanism, we would try to annihilate it. So we burned all the, codices of the Aztecs and the Mayans, and whatever we could do. And it almost really began to seem to me that the modern West became possessed by this one form of consciousness, this kind of separatist, rationalist mindset that only perceived kind of material reality, material goods as meaningful, and anything that was part of this kind of intuitive dimension of being, this mystical dimension, was radically suppressed. So, that was a pretty intense discovery, and that really, once I'd kind of reintegrated this shamanic understanding of reality, that led me to my second book, 2012, because I realized that, if our modern culture had suppressed an entire system of knowledge, and I really think you could see shamanism as a kind of science or technology or technique of dealing with these other dimensions of consciousness. So if we'd suppressed it, that meant that we were kind of really only dealing with half a deck. We were dealing with half a world or something. And then I felt it was important to take what these other cultures had to say about our world today very, very seriously. And when I started to do that, I discovered that a lot of these cultures have a prophetic understanding of this particular time that we're in right now. One of the most often sort of quoted ones these days is the idea of the classical Mayan civilization from the Yucatan, which saw that there was some kind of epochal shift in human culture and consciousness and civilization that was centered around this threshold of the year 2012 in our calendar. So then I spent 4 or 5 years trying to understand what the heck that could mean, and looking at it from all these different angles, and really trying to bring in the Western philosophical tradition and sort of meld that with this more shamanic understanding. So I talked about Nietzsche and Heidegger and Carl Jung and Rudolf Steiner and quantum physics, and how they quantum physicists had arrived at a more kind of consciousness-based understanding of the nature of reality. That there really wasn't the potential for a kind of objective observer separate from the material world that they were observing. You could really, once again, just coming back to this idea that, we'd just gotten onto this certain track, about our ability to dominate natural systems and dominate nature. I mean, Francis Bacon, who was one of the, beginners of the modern scientific method, he said that, we must torture nature until she reveals her secrets. So that's kind of where our modern project has been oriented. It's this idea that there's a kind of masculine, objective, rational, observing consciousness that can dissect and amputate and take apart this kind of feminine nature. And I think we're really seeing, what that mindset, what that paradigm, leads to right now. It's sort of coming to a head, So that was really the trajectory of the two books. And I don't think, now 2012, a lot of people, it's being kind of dogmatically misrepresented in the culture and kind of reverberating around people's psyches as the end of the world, and I really do not think that's the case at all. I think it's a transformation. It's a kind of evolutionary cycle. And, it's really about this kind of new worldview that's possible. The book is subtitled The Return of Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, or Kukulkan in the Mayan language, is a deity, an archetype that represents the meeting of a bird and snake. So it's the feathered serpent or the plumed serpent. And you could see, bird and snake representing these kind of dualistic opposition of the bird that's in the air flying around, the snake that's on the ground slithering. So it's kind of the meeting of air and matter, heaven and earth, spirit and matter. Or you could think of it as the integration of these two seemingly opposed knowledge systems, the kind of intuitive, mystical, and shamanic traditions of the East and the indigenous cultures, and our modern Western rational science. And I think that's one of the really profound things that's happening right now, is that these two forms of knowing are kind of coming together. And as they really come together, that is this next level, next form of human consciousness. And it's a very kind of difficult, delicate balance and delicate process. So in terms of thinking about psychedelics in our culture, I have a friend, Morgan Brent, who's a herbalist, and used to work with Terence McKenna, and he has a whole way of framing the story, which I think is really nice. I mean, I think language, is a great tool. We have to, we can never forget that our models are just models and not, absolutes, But anyway, but his story about it is that you could think about these